welcome to our session on listening skills. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is everyone listening?
Yes,
all right, I hope you are, because we are going to talk about that skill, which is a very important skill that we use every day as part of our communication process. So tonight we have a distinguished panel with us, and I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves. First, we have Miss Sherry Barrow. Sherry, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good night, everyone. As Dr. Ness said, I'm Sherry. Nice to meet you all.
We have Mr. David Andrew.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you again on this platform to share on a very important topic, the skill of listening. Look forward to a very intriguing time together. Thank you.
And of course, Pastor Henry.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you this evening. Somehow my video is giving me some problems. It's good to be with you this evening. We are going to have a wonderful evening. I'm certain about that, and we trust that you have come with your questions and everything, and you have come to share. Look forward to a wonderful evening together.
Well, let's get started. As many of you as could share your videos with us, we'd appreciate it, because we would like to see your smiling faces while we hear and listen from you this evening. All right, so now let's look at, now you've received a link to a listening skills assessment from Mind Tools, and I'm hoping that everyone had the opportunity to complete that assessment. If you have, you did receive a score, and we're going to look at some of the scores and what they say. Pastor Henry, could you share your screen, please?
I have the poll, so what we're going to ask you to is to just to probably enter the score that you got on the test. Yes, so I'm going to launch the poll.
Okay.
Right, great.
Hope everyone remembered their number.
Just 7 people at the test. Is everyone finished? We only had 7 people so far, having 7, 8, seemingly. So do I end the poll, Dr. Nell, off, or?
I guess we can. I guess we can go ahead and end it.
All right.
Perhaps not everyone had the opportunity to complete it.
So I'm going to share the results so that you can see them.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yes.
So most of us are in the 50 to 70 category. 50% of us are in the 57 to 70 category. So let's talk about what these scores mean. If you scored between 14 and 29, the comments related to those scores say that you need to improve your listening skills. This is not a judgment. This is just an encouragement to work on increasing that wonderful skill. It says that the people around you probably feel that you don't pay attention to them when they talk to you, and they may feel that you don't understand them. You can boost your listening skills with some simple steps, and the Mind Tools gives you some ideas on how to boost those skills. Now, if you fall in the 30 to 49 category, your listening skills are okay, but there's definitely room for improvement. Again, there are some suggested tools for you. It says, pay attention to the advice on empathic listening, because apparently that's the area that this score indicates that you need to really improve. We'll talk about that tonight. And if you are in the 50 to 70 range, you have good listening skills. People feel that they are able to approach you if they need someone to listen to them. And they trust that you'll give them your full attention. They also know that you'll give them space to talk freely without interrupting or talking too much about yourself. Now, that does not mean that you've reached, that you're perfect. There's still room for improvement. So again, look at the coaching and mentoring opportunities to help improve your skill. So kudos to everyone who completed the assessment, and we will continue to work on improving our listening skills together. Listening, as I mentioned, is a very important skill. You know, whenever you mention the word listening, people think of hearing. And hearing is simply the act of perceiving sound. Unless you're hearing impaired, you simply hear what's going on. You hear the sound, that's it. However, listening is much more significant than just hearing sound. It is something that you consciously choose to do because it requires you to concentrate so that your brain could process the meaning of words and the meaning of sentences and the meaning behind the words that you're saying, as well as the meaning behind the words that you're not saying. Listening engages not just your ears, it also engages your eyes and your heart. With your ears, you hear sound, but with your eyes, you're able to look at the nonverbal cues of the individual, and you can tell based on what they're saying and what they're not saying and what their facial expression is doing, whether or not there's congruence between what they're saying and what they're not. And with your heart, you listen to the emotions, the feelings that go along with what the person is saying. So we need the eyes, the ears, and the heart to concentrate on what the individual is saying so that we can respond to them effectively. So now I am going to go to Miss Sherry to talk about poor listening skills. Please unmute. Please unmute, Sherry. We can't hear you.
Good night, everyone. We can agree that poor listening skills affect effective communication. Tonight, I want to highlight a few of these poor listening techniques we have adopted throughout the years, we, including myself. When I read anything that you're guilty of doing, I want you to give me a thumbs up. There's an icon at the bottom of the screen. Don't be shy. My thumbs may be up for many of these. Number one, constantly interrupting. We all have one thing in common when we're talking. We want to be listened to. So if you're one of those people who tend to jump in and interrupt, you will be called a conversational bulldozer. Number two, multitasking. Conversations deserve your full attention and not only the half-hearted glances you're willing to give when you manage to rip your focus away from the television screen or your mobile phone. Number three, equating your experiences. Tell me if this situation sounds familiar. Someone is explaining a difficult problem he or she is currently facing. You immediately retort with, I know exactly how you feel. Number four, avoiding direct contact. Have you ever texted someone who lived in your home and were at home with you? And were at home and you were at home with them? Maybe you're avoiding talking directly to them. Getting personal. One of the biggest signs of poor communication is focusing on people rather than on the problem. Number six, getting overly emotional. if you let your emotions overwhelm you when you're trying to express or explain a situation. Number 7, keeping score. Now, I'm sure that most women here would have their thumbs up. Women especially are bad at this. We remember past wrongs and we drag them into every difficult conversation and hammer our loved ones on their head. Let's see how many you had thumbs up for it. Dr. Neff, over to you. I didn't get to see any thumbs up.
You didn't see any? I had mine up a couple times.
Oh, okay. Mine, I think I only missed one.
Oh, wow. I love the conversational bulldozer. I know someone who is just like that. Bulldozes his or her way, I'm not going to say what gender it is, into conversations. So thank you for sharing that, Sherry. How many of you feel that you identified with at least one of those? At least one, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So now, David, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Neff, and good evening, everybody, again. So, Sherry, thank you very much for sharing on and highlighting how easy it is for us to practice some of those negative behaviors that impact on our listening. So my task is to talk about the hows of effective listening. And you might hear people talking about active listening, attentive listening. When we talk about that, what that is, active listening is a style of listening in which the behaviors of the listener enhance the flow and the quality of information that's being given by the speaker. So let me say that again. Active and attentive listening is a style of listening in which the behaviors of the person who's listening, the behaviors enhance the flow and the quality of information being given by the speaker. So right? The aim and the focus is not to direct or to manipulate or to correct the speaker's story, but simply to understand it and to get into the speaker's world. So that's all the main objective of active and attentive listening. Now there are some key skills. Now we can talk about, Pastor Henry will later talk about empathic listening, so I wouldn't go there, but there are 5 key skills in active listening that I want to share with us. They are attending, acknowledging, inviting, summarizing, and asking. So those 5 skills are key skills in the how we listen. So let's talk about them briefly. When we talk about attending, what are attending skills? Attending, basically, we try to focus on the individual using both ears and eyes. Dr. Neff talked about that, but how exactly do we do that? So we're observing body posture, we're paying attention to that with our eyes, we're observing facial expressions, we looking at the energy that the person gives in the conversation, because all of that tells something in the listening process. So we can't just be sitting by idly and, well, I'm listening to you, you know. No, we're observing the body language as well. We're noting the tone of voice, the rate and the volume of speech. If the speech is flat, if the speech is all excitable, then all of these are pointers and things that we need to if we are going to attend and develop the attending skill. Then we're making eye contact. That's important. In our culture, at least in Western culture, it's important to make eye contact because that is a sign of attending to the individual. We need to set our own concerns aside momentarily to focus on the individual and what is being said. So, you know, sometimes we're guilty of, Dr. Neff talked about it, multitasking. So set aside the other concerns and focus on what is being said. Let the speaker set the pace, and we don't direct the conversation, but we let them flow. So these are things in a nutshell that if we practice, we will build and enhance the attending skill. as part of listening. So let me move quickly. We want to acknowledge. So the first is attending. The second is acknowledging. How do we acknowledge?
Come girl, here.
So in acknowledging, we go with the person's story rather than against it. Because remember, the aim is not to get the fact. The aim is to understand the person's world, the person's view. Whether we agree with it or not is another story. But for listening, active listening, the skill is simply to understand the person's view, where they come from, their world. And so we go with rather than against the person's story. We do not block, we do not sidetrack, we do not respond within the person's story unnecessarily. So we go with the story. Then we must use simple words and expressions to express the speaker's thoughts and feelings. So simple expressions like,
Actually, don't drink that tea, we should drink that.
must be difficult. It might be pretty tough. Simple things like that that tells the speaker, hey, this person is following me and he understands where I'm coming from. You acknowledge that way. So include non-verbal behaviors as well as part of your acknowledging. So a shake head. All of those non-verbals that you use to suggest that you're following and that the person is connecting with you, those help to build the skill of acknowledging, right? So the third area is inviting. So when in developing the skill, we need to develop the skill of inviting. How do we do that? We ask the speaker to continue. So we say things like, tell me more. Tell me how that works. Tell me about that. So the questions are not necessarily close-ended leading questions, but they're open-ended that invite the individual to continue sharing at his pace, at his willingness or her willingness. Keep inviting the speaker 2 or 3 times. Tell me more. Tell me what you mean by that. Simple terms like that will encourage the person to bring clarity to what they're saying. You can feel free to invite when there's a pause. Because, you know, often we have the urge, once there's a pause, it's as if we feel that silence is forbidden in conversations. So once there's a pause, we feel we have to jump in there with some degree of conversation, and sometimes it's not helpful. But you can invite, I'm here, you go on, right? Inviting allows the whole story to come out in layers, just like an onion, as the person feels important, feel comfortable. So that's the third skill. We have 2 more. Then we're talking about summarizing. How do we summarize? Summarizing is a very important skill because it helps to give the speaker the assurance that the person who is listening has captured what you're saying. And it's something that needs to be practiced. So you repeat what you've just heard the speaker say in your own words. It's called reframing. So you don't just take it for granted that what I just heard was that he doesn't want me to come again. You say, I just heard you say you don't want me to come again. Did I hear you rightly? When you say that, you are giving the speaker the opportunity to correct your understanding if you were incorrect, or to check to see you had it correctly. That's reframing. So that's a critical part of developing the summarizing skill. Use words like, I hear you say, or in other words, are you saying so-and-so? So you're double checking the message that you think you've interpreted, that you think you've gotten. Sometimes we just take the message and we run with it, but that is subject to our own thinking, our own experiences, and so you want to make sure you ask. Try not to add or subtract from the speaker's message. So in building the summarizing skill, you don't want to add your own interpretation. You simply want to get the message as succinctly as possible without adding, without taking out, without saying the little piece that you interpreted to be something that you felt had to have been in there. Take the speaker's message and that only. Ask for clarification of your summary. So I gather you mean ABC, am I right? And you wait for it. Yes, you're right, they would say. Or, no, you missed it. This is what I'm really trying to say. And you get to have to be clarified. Watch the speaker's nonverbals to your summary. Sometimes when you make your summary, the speaker may nod, and you can see the facial saying yes, you got it. Or you can see this facial saying, you didn't quite get it. So pay attention to that. And avoid saying things like, I understand what you mean, because very often none of us could easily understand what the other person means because they're different, their experiences and their interpretation of what they're going through is quite different to what we think we hear them saying. Finally, the skill of asking. So we talked about 4 skills, and the final one, the skill of asking. Ask who, what, where, and how. In other words, these are the questions you ask. Who is getting involved? What happened? Where? How? Note I didn't say ask why. Avoid asking why. If you're going to develop the skill of asking, you avoid asking why. You know, sometimes we ask people these kind of tough questions. Well, why you do this thing? Why you got pregnant? Why? The truth is, many times we really don't have the answers. And the why, it brings across a kind of condemnatory connotation to it that impedes the conversation. Remember, these skills are about making the flow and the quality of information that the speaker is giving a lot more reliable, a lot easier. So avoid asking why, and ask questions least and last. So don't be quick to ask questions in the middle of the story. You ask questions closer to the end when almost the complete story was shared, but there are some parts that are not connecting well, some dots you need to line up. So you say, well, tell me, I gather you said so and so up there. Who was there when you said that? Or where did that happen? So you're connecting the dots to bring completeness to the story when you ask. So you ask last and you ask least. If you practice those 5 skills, you'll find yourselves improving in your attending behaviors and increasing the listening skill. I would rest. Dr. Neff, thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. That was a lot of great skills and techniques and information. So I'm going to pause right now for the audience to ask any questions you may have. Actually, there is a question in the chat, and I will read it for you. It's from Trevor. He says, but asking why is dependent on the relationship and the purpose of the conversation, no?
Well, I would say that's easy, and that's probably his prerogative to say, because he knows why, the whys of the conversation. But more often than not, from my experience, why is a very threatening question. Why did you do that? The truth is, I'm not even sure. I'm probably embarrassed. So yes, it depends on the level of your conversation, whom you're talking with, and it probably can be asked, but very often, and particularly for more emotionally charged conversations, from my experience, I can recommend you avoid it as far as possible, because it carries with it a certain degree of psychological blame and difficulty that makes the flow of information a lot more difficult.
And I will add to that, that it also places the other person on the defensive, because the person may feel judged depending on what it is. They may feel judged, and they feel that you're not open to really hearing what they are wanting to share. So it does put them on the defensive. Thank you. Correct. All right. We're open for questions. Come on in. Okay, here's another one. If I understand what the person is going through, can you share? If you understand what the person is going through, can you share? Is the question.
Well, question. I think the question is already, I have a problem with the question, because I stay away from saying that I understand what the person is going through. That's a very risky statement to make.
Right.
We might be going through a similar loss. You might lose a father, I might lose a father, and we might think, well, I understand because I've lost a father too. But the degree of relationship, the circumstances, the connection we had, all of these things are subject to individual experiences that could determine how it impacts us. So I still want to avoid saying that, but disclosure can be useful at times if you want to share. But what I would suggest, instead of saying you understand though, you might say, listen, I had a similar experience, And in my case, this is what I did. In my case, here is how I coped. That can happen, but don't be too quick to do that. It can happen much later down, not within the person's story, because you run the risk in some cases of stealing the person's story and making it yours. And you want to be careful about that. Listen, because our function is to listen more than anything else and understand the person's world.
Very good. Very good. Other questions? Feel free to ask questions about poor listening skills as well, because I'm sure you have some of those.
Good night. I do have a question, Bevon here. Sometimes you make a comment or you say something and you realize that people respond out of their own insecurities. How do you have a conversation with someone who you realize might be responding out of their own insecurities? And how do you ensure that you do not respond out of your own insecurities in dealing with maybe a particular conversation?
David, you want to take that?
Problem at all. So how do you respond when someone is responding to something you say out of their own insecurity? Now, that's one of the challenges of effective listening, because each person comes into situations with a certain degree of psychological inhibition. And one of the reasons people can't open up and don't open up is because they feel some degree of worry, concern, fear that what if, and all of these questions exist. And so our task is to make sure we lower those psychological barriers. They would exist. There'd be people who, from their own places of insecurity, as you rightly said, may feel that the statement is targeting them. Our task is to continue to lower the barriers, and to reassure them in as gentle the ways as we can that that's not what this is about, and we simply try to understand where they are coming from, particularly if they're the ones speaking. If they're the ones sharing the story, let's limit the comments and just let them share, and at the end try to reflect that we understand it. There's not very much you could do apart from just ensuring that you minimize the opportunities for casting blame, for casting judgment, simply reassuring and ensuring that you continue to try to understand their point of view.
Thank you. Thank you. Pastor Henry? You're muted, sir.
Yeah, one of the aspects of listening, especially in situations that are confrontational, for conflict of the nature of being in some form of conflict, is the ability to listen with your heart and listen with feelings. Oftentimes, this is an area I think that we fall down, and I'm not talking about the occasion when my wife would come in and ask me a question, and somehow, like, I'm shaking my head. You know, I know she spoke, but I didn't hear. I know she spoke. It was audible for me to hear, but the question just didn't register in your head because I was involved with something else. You know that kind of a situation? I think you've been there, right? You know, you've been there with individuals. Now, that is okay. That is all right when you have a good relationship. When you're in conflict with that person, that is trouble. Right, so you want a different form of listening. You want to take on a different idea of listening, and David would have mentioned a few that relate, a few of the items that relate directly to empathic listening. And empathic listening is actually learning to listen with your heart, learning to feel what the person is saying. All of us speak in language with our feelings. We use words that would express our feelings. And oftentimes in those situations, when we are in a conflict or of that nature, you are trying to advise somebody, most of the times we listen with the intent to respond to what the person is saying. So especially men, as myself, we often listen to fix the problem. And the truth is that not everybody needs the problem to be fixed. They just need to be heard. And as I mentioned some time ago, my wife, when she catches me not listening in that way, she would change the conversation. And when I give the response before the statement is finished, she would change the whole subject as to suggest that I am listening and I didn't wait for the conclusion of the matter. Now, that is poor listening. No thing there. So when I'm caught doing that, I agree, all right, so you caught me, I fixed too fast, what have you. That may happen when you are talking about something about the garden or something or the other, the lawnmower is broken down and you find a solution. But when you have a conflict with that other person, you have some sort of a disagreement and you listen in that way, you are looking for more problems, you're looking for greater problems. And so how do we listen empathically? And David mentioned a few of them, that you listen with the intent to understand what the person is saying. Sometimes it would mean reflecting what the person says or has already said. You reflect that in your own words to the person, hoping to get a better understanding of what the person is trying to relate to you, because you do not want to take what they're saying and interpreting what they're saying. That's how we are built naturally. Somebody is talking to us and we are interpreting what they're saying to us based on our own frame of mental reference. And oftentimes the person is operating outside of our frame of reference. Let me share with you a personal experience. I lived in Trinidad most of my life. My wife is from Barbados, and during our period of courtship, it was a lot easier to communicate writing each other than talking to each other, right? Because I didn't realize that Bajans up to that point in time spoke a different type of English language. You guys are laughing, but uno, I know what uno and all of that kind of a thing. I didn't know what it meant.
Wanna.
I still can't even pronounce the word. Thank you very much. So when you are speaking to me and you tell me wanna, and I'm sitting down there trying to figure out, you understand? So if there's a conflict and you use that word in the conflict, it makes life so much more difficult for the person that is communicating. And so sometimes in those situations, you have to be doing so much more to try to figure out what the person, not to figure out, but to get from the person exactly what they mean, lest you go off into your own frame of reference. Wanna, that's how you pronounce it? It doesn't even have a... Okay, so that proves that my citizenship isn't fully you understand. I have the passport, but I have everything else. Okay, so listen empathically.
If I may jump in, good night, everyone. What I found is that it is easier to listen to someone attentively when you are not the object of their conflict, right? So I could sit down and listen to you vent about all kinds of people, but for the time I am the person that you are venting with, all of those nice listening skills have a tendency to go in the back seat. And I particularly like tonight's topic because this is one thing that I struggle with for many years. I would not just listen to respond, I would listen to interrupt intentionally, because if I know that you're going from A to Z, and by the time you get to C, you say something I don't like, we at C, and we can be at C until I'm ready to move on. And if I'm ready to move on, conversation's done, right? So this was one, because I am by nature a confrontational person. It runs in my family. So I actually had to learn to not be so confrontational and I remember one time I went to counseling with an ex-boyfriend, and the lady from my church, she was like, Aisha, you have to get that meek and gentle spirit. And I'm like, you talking to me? That don't live here. It ain't gonna live here, and I ain't gonna get it no time soon. So I realized that, and it also helped me in my professional career as well, that you definitely do need to listen. You have to let persons get everything out of them before you respond, because you can't move on if persons don't have the opportunity to get it out. And yes, you have to kind of develop what I would call a poker face, so that it isn't all. And you also have to develop certain skills in terms of not melting down. And what I call a meltdown is, I always doing everything wrong. I never do anything right. You always got a problem with me. You always think that I need you. So that's what I call a meltdown. So I think that it calls for a lot of emotional intelligence, maturity as well, especially if you are the object of a person's conflict, because you will never ever get to hear their heart if you're just listening to interrupt. That's me.
Thank you, Aisha. So here's a question for the audience. Do men and women listen differently? Do men and women listen differently? I would like to hear from the audience.
Just
Yes.
turn on your mic and go right ahead.
Yes.
Somebody say yes.
Aisha says yes. Okay, but can you qualify that? Can you tell me why you say yes?
Okay, all right. Classic example. So
we lost you?
Yeah, probably somebody else can go.
Yes. Turn your mics on and let's hear your thoughts on, do men and women listen differently? Okay. I'm seeing in the chat some yes, they do, yes. Nope, it's a learned skill, so it depends. Yes, we do. Women speak using more words while men use less. Okay. Other thoughts? I really would like to to hear someone's voice, because I want to hear your voice. I want to see your nonverbals, and I want to listen for that emotion. Dr. Sutherland, I know you're there.
Sorry, guys, I got kicked off.
Yes. Is Dr. Sutherland with us?
I'm here, but I didn't hear the question.
The question is, and this is for the audience, do men and women listen differently?
Yeah, you know that what is it? Women are pink, men are blue, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, all these cliches. I think that to a certain extent, yes, men and women listen differently, especially when we're in similar groups. Like I see Tiffany said, women use more words while men say less. So women tend to sit across the chair from each other, and we engage and we talk and we use our hands and we get excited. And especially if it's a topic or something that you're genuinely interested in, you're into it. Men tend to sit next to each other, looking in the same direction. And I know this is cliche, and I know this is a stereotype, but this is what we've more or less been socialized understanding about men and women. And some men, they tend to say nothing, and at the end of 5 hours, they've said barely 10 sentences, and it was a great day. So that when you get a male and a female now in a conversation, the woman wants to talk for 5 hours, and the man is like, well, I just want to sit here and chill. But I even want to go beyond the male-female relationship and talk about how men and women listen differently when it comes to children, or when it comes to parents, or when it comes to their peers. I find that, oftentimes, not all women, but some women would go into a meeting at work, and we tend to take things a bit personal. And so you have to train yourself to see, when someone makes a comment about this project or about this issue, hear their comments related to the project and the issue. They're not saying you are a failure or that you did wrong. And these are things, when you talk about the skill of listening, that we have to break as people. We have to learn to not take things so personally. Women tend to embody what they do, what projects they're in, their relationships. And so if there is a potential failure or perceived failure, they see it as self-failure. A man, on the other hand, is just like, par for the course. Okay. I mean, I kind of understand. Yeah, I may have done that wrong, but they seem to have this uncanny ability to hear the critique or the comments and move on and move past it. Not all men. I'm just saying, when you talk about the differences between gender listening, when it comes to parenting, mothers want to fix. They want to understand heart. So I would go into my daughter's room, for example, and I want her to tell me how our entire day was, from the time where we dropped you off to school. How did the air smell when you walked into the schoolyard? Who did you see? Oh, how's so-and-so doing? And she's just like, I just want to tell you that it was good. Like, it was good. Shut up. I don't want to talk to you. Leave my room. Why are you here? A father, kind of understands, how was your day? It was good. Okay, cool. Move on. So the short answer is yes. I think men and women tend to listen differently sometimes, but there is room for training ourselves to do the empathetic listening, to listen, to understand, to make sure we understand someone else's point of view, whether that is a spouse, a partner, a friend, a daughter, son, etc., and understand genuinely where they're coming from, to hear heart, as Pastor Henry said, and to respond to that. So I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's really a good segue into talking about listening preferences, because you actually touched on one of those preferences. And the first preference is people-oriented. Some of us are very people-oriented when we're listening. We really want to hear that person. We focus on the person, what they're saying, how they're saying it, and we're into that person. And then others of us are more action-oriented, and Pastor Henry spoke about that earlier, where we are listening to fix. We are listening to do something about it. We are listening to bring about some type of results, because we're action-oriented. And then there are others who are more time-oriented. We want you to be to the point. Give it to me straight to the point, the key points. Do not walk around the park and smell the roses. Just give it to me. A, B, C, D. And then others are content oriented, which is what Sasha just expressed, where you want to hear the facts, the evidence, the supporting details, what color this was, how it was done, what this person looked like. You want all the content. And I remember when my oldest child was in college, and she would call home, to say hi and so forth. And she is more of a content person. She's very detailed. And I am more, give me the points. Give me just the facts, Max. Give me the points. And she would call home from school, and she says, and she would say to me, oh, guess who I saw today? So I said, who? So I'm expecting a name. Well, first of all, my friend and I, we went to the mall, and we were looking for this, and and I'm thinking, oh my Lord, I just want to know who. I don't want to know what you were doing. But she gives me the whole entire story before she finally says, and when we were getting ready to leave the restaurant, now we are all the way to the restaurant, right? Then we saw Alice. Well, but as a parent, you know, your child is away at school, you want to just listen to them, and you want to give her the opportunity to share. So I don't say, well, tell me who. I just sit and I hold my head and I say, okay, let me just sit here until she gets to my answer, because I am, give me the facts, and she is, I want to tell you the whole story. So those are our preferences in listening. So I don't know, and I said all that to say this. I'm not sure that we can put a gender preference on it. It just varies, because if you say that males listen to fix, then I listen to fix. That's how I listen. I want to fix whatever it is, right? But it's just that we tend to be more action-oriented in our listening style. And it has more to do with our preference, our style of listening, more so than male-female, because it could vary from one to the next. Comments? Pastor Henry, you seem to have a comment.
Yes, I found this article, and I probably can share it. I think it takes us outside of our level of understanding. But it says a combined research project between the University of California, Irvine, and the University of New Mexico identified a gender difference between the amount of gray matter and white matter found in our brain. The amount of gray matter was 6 times greater in the brains of the male research participants, while the woman participating in the study had 10 times the amount of white matter the men did. These disparities were identified in genders with comparable intelligence. A heavier reliance on gray matter may assist men with localized tasks, while increased white matter may help women excel in integrating and assimilating a skill taught to aid language skills. Despite activating different activity centers within the brain, genders perform equally on measures of cognitive function. This means that although we listen and assimilate information differently, the difference does not appear to affect cognition or ability to listen. Difference in the way we listen do not seem to impact listening performance. More research is needed to link processing difference to communication styles. However, most would agree that men and women have different listening and communication style. While listening, men tend to focus primarily on the information required to successfully complete a task or solve a problem. Conversely, women connect more to the emotional tone of the conversation. Whether or not preferred communication style relate directly to physical difference between genders remains unclear. So it's still unclear, but seemingly it's our gray and white matter that is causing the problem.
Dr. Neff.
Thank you for sharing that.
Dr. Neff?
Yes.
I think I just want to chime in here a little bit, because
yes, please do.
I would rather not see it as listening differently. I'd rather see it as, because of our difference in makeup, and Pastor Henry read about gray matter, we know about brain and the analytical brain, and males being more analytical and females being more, and we know all of those neurological things that suggest the differences. Because of those differences, we have different challenges to listening. We come to the listening situation with a natural bias. We analytical, so we want to analyze it and fix it. And that's part of our natural biological makeup. That presents a unique challenge to the listening process. The linguistic element that Pastor Henry talked about comes to the table most naturally for many women, so they have a lot of details that would frustrate a man who just wants to get to the point and who wants to analytically get to the center of that matter. Now we come to the table with those inherent biologically made challenges, but good active listening comes back to what we started talking about. The woman has to learn it, the man has to learn it, the man has to shave off where he needs to shave off and give more time for detail to understand the woman's world. And the woman has to shave off where she needs to shave off to understand that the man's world when he comes to speak. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's a matter of listening differently, but it's being different. They present different challenges to the listening process. I would say in that way.
Thank you. Now, I want to kind of zero back to the poor listening, because some of the challenges that David just alluded to and Pastor Henry takes us back to poor listening. So I want to zero back to Sherry and see if she can fill in some more of the blanks with poor listening and talk a little bit about the impact or how poor listening affects communication.
Hi, everyone. Let me get straight to one that would help us women, because we seem to be losing this battle tonight. Okay. This one is not going to help us. Keeping score. How many of you keep the score? How many females keep score? We didn't see a thumbs up. There's an icon at the bottom of the screen, the reaction. Or males, you can do that as well. How many of you keep score?
No. I wanted to.
Go ahead, Pastor.
No, I was going to put a thumbs up for the women keeping a score.
Pastor, be fair. We're not being gender biased tonight. How many?
No, I didn't put my thumbs up.
No, tell the truth. How many of us keep score? Let me put my thumbs up.
Yeah, let's get everyone to put their thumbs up if that's you. We're not going to look at your faces. We're just going to look at the thumb.
Okay, so this is as though a recollection of everything that has happened or everything that has ever happened makes us correct. So we're more looking at winning. But when we do this, we've already lost. So right away, we can say that keeping the score is not important. And I am here listening to all of this, and I'm trying to relate to my own personal situation. And I'm saying, you know what? If the men would only give the women what they really need, things would be better. Lend more of an ear. You may not want to talk, but talk a little more to us. I'm going to pull David at this one. David, would you say that you can give your wife a little bit more of an ear, or you can talk a little more to make her feel comfortable?
Actually, I'm one of those. I talk probably more than my wife. Believe you me, I kid not. Her father is right there, so he will attest to that.
Can I ask someone else who's here to come on and say something? Dr. Facilitator, I see you smiling all the while.
See, I am the opposite. I'm the opposite. I am not a talker. I do more listening than talking, and I don't keep scores because I don't remember what happened. You know, it happened, it's gone. I'm done with it. It's gone. You have to remind me that something happened, because I just don't keep score. I just, that's just not me. I'm not a talker. My husband talks a lot more than I do. He is the talker. I am more the listener.
Okay. Anyone has anything they want to add?
That's why you are so happy.
So Pastor Henry, you're telling us that's the attitude to adopt: talk less, let your husband talk more?
Well, I would say that for men it's a challenge for most men to be talkative. And it's not that we don't know that we should talk. We know, those of us who have read the Mars and Venus, we know that women are very much comforted by the voice of the man, as it were. But it takes a lot. It takes a lot from most men to talk. Even when you have men and men together, it's, listen to the conversations of men and men, and we can't talk about it on the program here, but they tell you it's the goodly gentleman told you it's locker room. It's the always locker room talk. It doesn't have any substance. It's And so you have to make that effort. You have to make that effort as Christian men when you sit down to have a good conversation, to really converse one with the other. Sometimes, I mean, but there was one exception that I knew. There was one exception that I knew. I can't remember whether it was in Grenada or it might have been in St. Vincent. It would have been in St. Vincent. There were these two brothers, twin brothers. And they would leave on Saturday morning to get the bus to go to the city to do their shopping. They lived not too far from each other. And those guys would stand by the road and talk for the whole day. The buses would pass, go to town, come back, go to town, come back. And at the evening, they would just walk back home because they stood by the road whole day and talked. Those were two exceptional men. I don't know how they did it, but you don't find men doing that. You know, after they finish they discussing the football game or the cricket game, that's it. You know, am I right, Pastor Samuel?
I beg to differ because you do talk about things that you are interested in. They stood by the bus stop and they talked on a variety of topics. They stood in the locker room and they talked about football or cricket. But you're telling me that when that's finished, that's finished.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So generally, men talk about what they're interested in. So what about us? Why can't you show us that you're interested in us? I'm seeing Dr. Facilitator laughing all the time. He's up on my screen. I would love him to come on and talk.
I'm going to spotlight him so he comes right up to the top of the screen.
He's holding his mouth.
I don't know, because of my job, I have learned to talk, but I agree with Pastor Henry, because lots of men, it's difficult to get a lot out of them. After they've gone to the things that they're interested in, it's finished. And so men struggle to talk about meaningful things, things that that's affecting them, until they get in a rough patch and they have no choice. Maybe then they'll open up. So it depends on the circumstance. Some men may talk, and sometimes depending on the circumstance, some men shut down completely. So it's a struggle, but I find I'm able to talk. But I think sometimes women are not always clear as to when you should talk. Women sometimes will talk, and if you respond at the wrong time, sometimes this is a time for you to listen and not respond. And sometimes if a man is not sure, he may respond the wrong time, because sometimes they want you to respond, and sometimes they don't want you to respond. And sometimes a man is confused as to when. So sometimes he responds and she gets upset because that's the time she was hoping he would just listen. And the time he just get quiet, that's when she said, say something. So sometimes women can make it difficult for men, because they don't always tell us, okay, this is when you can actually say something, and this is when you can just listen. So men get confused sometimes trying to decipher that with women. Hope I've helped you, my sister. So we need to know exactly when should we listen to you and when should we talk. But generally, but I think many in the kingdom are learning more and more now how to open up and to share, because it's important for family and spending time. So we're learning. We're learning. Pastor Henry is teaching people like me how to open up and to talk, you know. But sometimes we're intimidated by just a situation, or sometimes men just prefer to be silent because some women just want to just speak and speak. Want input, but you mustn't speak.
You know, a lot was said. Ladies, I think this is time to jump in, because there are a lot of nuggets shared here that are a little dicey. So what say you?
Dr.
One of the, yes.
I just wanted to issue a word of warning to Dr. Samuel. I don't have a contribution, but I'm like, Dr. Samuel, you're very brave. Good luck to you. Over to the ladies in the chat.
what he seems to be saying is that women should just tell men what they want them to do. If you want them to listen, just say this is for you to listen. If you want them to say something, then say something. But I feel as if it sounds as if women should be telling the men what they want from them before they start to speak.
So every time, if I understand you correctly, Aisha, correct me if I'm wrong. This is what I hear you saying. That you said that he is saying that women should tell men before they begin speaking the type of posture they expect them to take while listening. So this should happen before every conversation. You know.
The reason why I say that too, because I actually heard it on a series called Love and Respect series, is that sometimes because men have a tendency to jump to conclusions or to fix, just tell them in advance what is expected in this moment. If you just want me to listen, tell me. if you want my input, tell me. But at the same time, I still feel as if if this person is your spouse, then you should be able to freely share and receive, and without feeling as if you're at the firing range.
So let me go down that rabbit hole. If this person is your spouse, this person should know at least by 5 years in, when I start my conversation, if it's a listening conversation or if it's a fixing conversation, wouldn't you say?
And what, so 5 years and you know by now?
I just put a number. I just put a number out there. I mean, whether it's 5, 10, 2, because just imagine
somebody's gonna get frustrated. So it may not, if you have that issue with listening, because communication and listening is a very big thing. If you don't have that balance and find what works for both of you, you won't get to 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Somebody's gonna be like, I'm done with this foolishness. So I feel as if the communication is a two-way street. It shouldn't have to be a tug and pull because I'm a woman, because you're a man. And some men talk more than women. It's not as if they're shy and they don't have a lot. Some men just go on and on and on. He's going to try to jump in like if you're playing jump rope, So it ain't just women that talk a lot,
And you're correct, but you just said something though. You said it's a two-way street. And according to a comment that's made in the chat, it sounds like the woman is doing a lot of work in that communication. Because if the woman has to always qualify what's being said, or, okay, now this is time for you to listen. This is time for you to fix. This is time for you to, that's a lot of work. Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, David.
Right. So I think I want to chime in again here because two things. One, Pastor Henry talked a little bit about empathic listening. And let me just re-emphasize that is listening to understand the feelings of the individual when they're speaking. And in any given conversation, you go back and forth because you're a listener, you're in regular conversations, exchanges between spouses. You're speaking, I'm responding, you're listening, but you expect, if the empathic listening is going to kick in, we have to be sensitive to the feelings of each other.
Yes.
And that is where I think the skill is lacking immensely. Because to even suggest, I can't see how, I think I agree with the comments that the women will have some real work to do to be telling me every time, well, I think I want you to feel sorry now. Or I think I want you to tell me that hurts a lot. Or I think I want you to tell me that you're going to do something to fix it. So I don't think it's meant to go that far. But I think there must be an active sensitivity to, okay, that sounds like it's really painful to you, so I must really give attention to it. And similarly, that sounds like it's really too long and boring for you, I must get to the point. So both parties need to develop that degree of sensitivity to the feelings and the needs of the partner in the communication. And it's not just saying, I have to tell the man what to do. Neither is it just saying, well, women continue to give more details than necessary, because you have to be sensitive to each other. And that's where the empathic listening comes in. And Dr. Neff, you mentioned about the 2 years, 5 years. The truth is, we are creatures of habit, and we are such good creatures at it that if after a couple of years we develop some bad maladaptive listening practices, they can well become the habits that we practice, and they can be set in stone where we just feel, all right, she likes to ramble, let me just leave her. But is that good for the communication and for the relationship? No. So even if we set it in and we say, okay, I know she's a person, she's going to keep talking, we still have to look towards doing what the appropriate practice is, the best practice, listening to feel what the other person is feeling and responding thereby.
Very well said. Very well said. I want to go to the comments real quick, and then I'll come back to Dr. Samuel. Some men may not talk verbally, but they talk a lot using their body language. That was from Janelle. And then Pastor Griffith says, so we are to believe that in conflict, people really care about listening. Pastor Henry?
Yes, you need to, in conflict, you need to really give consideration to anything else. The most attention should be given to your listening skills in conflict. I'll tell you why. Because when there is a conflict and you are talking and I'm responding and I'm sharing what is in my mind and you are sharing what is in your mind, it is very likely that the conflict of not understanding each other compounds the original conflict. And so you keep going on with more and more conflict. And I have seen too many examples of that what started off to be something of very minor. I think an example came to mind. So these two people, they are just married, just a week after the honeymoon. They just moved into their new house and what have you. The young lady gets up in the morning, turns on the weed whacker, and goes cutting the lawn. The gentleman tries to help, and somehow he's rebuffed. I'm doing it, leave me, let me get it done. 2 hours later, she finishes the lawn, and she comes into the house, and there is no food being prepared. She assumes that the husband did not try to prepare lunch because she was cutting the lawn. He assumed that her cutting the lawn, that she wants to be the man and she wants to make him look bad in the neighborhood, that they would think that he is lazy. And that created a big conflict that went throughout the end of the day. And it was not until probably 8 o'clock in the night that when they sat down together and they started to go through what was going through their minds that actually created the conflict, that they found resolve. So that's what happened basically when you are when you're in a conflict. The conflict is not existing, mind you, in what the person is saying or doing, or what the person may have said or done. The conflict exists in your mind. So whatever the person does or says, it's registered in your mind as something different altogether to what the other person may have said or done. And so you are building that whole problem in your head. And so until both parties get to the point where they can express themselves in a way that each other will listen with the intent to understand what I'm saying, it is only then that you realize, but after you go through all of that, then you realize, but we didn't intend to hurt each other, we just had these foolish thoughts in our head and thinking differently about one another, and look what it has caused. So yes, it is very important in a conflict to resolve it, if we are going to resolve it, to listen with the intent to feel what the other person is feeling, to get to know what is in the other person's mind.
Dr. Nath?
Yes.
Just add two things to Pastor Henry.
Yes.
In conflict, emotional intelligence is extremely important. And not only knowing when to, how to, and what to say to the person. Not only that, something very, very basic, respect. If you respect me enough you would sit and listen to what I am trying to tell you. And I think most times a lack of respect compounds the situation, so it causes further conflict. So we have to remember that in conflict, or sometimes not even in conflict, we have to be respectful of the person and actually listen to understand what they're trying to say. And we must use our emotional intelligence to actually know when to actually interrupt, if to actually interrupt, and know how to support the person that we're speaking to.
Well said, well said. So, Dr. Facilitator, we'll go to you and then we'll go to the panelists for their closing remarks.
Well, actually, I was going to ask a question. Do we think that because we are cultured in judgment, it creates barriers for listening, and we always assume what the person needs or we think what's going on before we allow them the chance to express and to explain? So do you think it's being cultured in judgment that supports those barriers and make it difficult for us to connect?
Okay. Who wants to take this one? David? Pastor Henry?
Go ahead, David.
I quite agree with you, Dr. Samuel. I think that's a huge part. In fact, I would say, I think, and I only say to people, words don't have meaning. Words don't mean a thing. People do. But sometimes in listening conversations, in exchanges, we take the words that we hear, and that is informed by the very biases you talk about, our own interpretation, our own biases, and we hear and interpret what we think we hear outside of trying to genuinely get the person's meaning. So Dr. Samuel, I think you're very spot on. I think that contributes significantly. The judgment and the perception, the biases that we have, they contribute significantly to what we interpret. And that often skews the messages that we are supposed to get, the meaning that we are supposed to get. It's blocked and it creates barriers for the communication and the listening process.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, now for closing remarks, Sherry.
I just want to tell everyone that just remember to respect each other when we're actually listening, and show the person that you're actually listening to them. Let them know that you actually care, and be courteous. It's so important just to be courteous. I would love for everyone to remember the poor listening skills or the poor listening techniques that we adopt and actually try to work on them. I myself am working on all of them, because at some point in time, you may just adopt one that you would find does not work for you. So I'll encourage you to work on those poor listening skills.
Thank you, Pastor Henry.
Dr. Neff, I think you have a few more comments in the chat. I don't know if you want me to read them. And
sure. Yes.
Sure. So someone said, what I've recognized over the years that men and women think differently, therefore they communicate differently. The way they have been socialized in their childhood and their experience in their families and how they resolve conflict is also a strong contributory factor. And I quite agree with that. The question was asked in reference to my statement from Pastor Griffith. Is it not better to cool off before having the conversation? Again, for Christians, I think that depends on your level of maturity. I don't think we should allow anger to take that big control of us in a conflict, so that we can't, but yeah, if you have to take time to think through the situation, and that's what I would probably do. Take time before how I should resolve, how I should work out the problem. And so during those times when I am thinking through, I try to avoid the subject. I stay quiet and making sure that when I talk and I have to say something, that I say the right thing instead of making it worse. and then say, somebody say, yes, for me personally, it is important. It's impatience, though. Maturity comes from the ability to sieve through and implement positive methods to communicate you may not have been accustomed to. And that is true. That is a part of Christian development. And so that as it has to do with the renewal of the mind, as we learn new skills and new techniques, we should try to implement them, and hopefully they improve our well-being. And then respect is so important. That was the last comment, and that I think I would probably use my closing remarks on. I remembered years ago, probably a few years ago, a gentleman came, and I may have said it, came to my home and knocked. I knew what the religion was. They knocked, and he wanted me to buy in on what he was selling. And so I said to him, well, sir, I'm a atheist. I don't believe in this thing that you're pushing at all. I'm an atheist. And he said, well, I'm here. I can change your mind on that. And I said, well, sir, I think if you would listen to me, I would be able to change your mind. Would you be willing to change your mind in what I have to say? And he said, no. I said, well, do you want me to change my mind in relation to what you say? And he said, yes. And I said, can you kindly leave my property, please? And he thought I was very harsh. But the simple reason is that you want me to respect you, but you have no respect for my ideology, my philosophy, my thought, nothing at all. And sometimes we approach, as Christians, we approach issues like that. This is it. This is what it's supposed to be. And I'm not saying principles. Principles remain principles. They're going to stay that way. But on issues that are neither here nor there, we have to at least, and David said it earlier, we may not agree with you, but we should hear you out. We should be able to listen and hear you out. And if our minds have to be changed, let our minds be changed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor Henry. David?
Yes, thank you. So let me say that listening is probably one of the single most important skills for healing, for treating with conflicts. I mean, meaningful listening, active listening, empathic listening, because that's the only how you can genuinely understand what the other person is trying to communicate and what they're feeling, and then that's what informs your response. It's not the same as hearing. It's not something we're supposed to multitask trying to do. And I know a lot of us as men, sometimes we become guilty. Yeah, I'm listening, but we're reading an article and we're reading the papers and we're watching the game, looking at CPL like I'm trying to do right now. I'm doing this and I'm trying to watch the score to see what's happening. All of that is kind of bad practice. But let me just say, I talked about a couple of skills, and it's important that we practice them. They're not all natural because we come with our own biases. Dr. Samuel was correct. We come with our own desire to defend, to try to butt in, to cut in, to correct. And so if we practice attending, if we practice acknowledging, inviting, summarizing, and asking appropriately, we would encourage the speaker to be more clear in their message, and we in turn will have a better opportunity to get a more concise meaning and message from the communication and be better able to respond and give appropriate feedback, and that will effect a better effective listening process. I thank you much.
Thank you. So I want to close the way I opened, and I want to refer back to the preferences. Your listening, regardless of your listening preferences, it's important to remember that you listen with your ears, your eyes, and your heart. All three of these are important. Don't just depend on the verbal utterances you are hearing from others, but listen attentively to their emotions, their feelings, as well as look at the nonverbals, so you can truly understand what the individual is saying. And I think there's one other comment in the chat here from Sherry. She says, be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. We want to thank all of you for being here with us tonight. We thank you for such an engaging dialogue on listening skills. And I pray that you learned something from this session tonight. If you have questions that you'd like to continue asking, please feel free to do so in the chat or reach out to us so that we can come back to you with answers to your questions. Pastor Henry, any closing remarks?
Yes, we have created a panel, YouTube channel on which we will post all our videos. To reach the channel, it's Real Talk Family Life. Real Talk Family Life. So you type that into YouTube, you should be able to come up with the chat or the discussions that we have been having. And next 2 weeks, which would be the 1st of September, I think it is, we will be back and we will wrap up this whole subject on communication. Probably some of the panel members will be back and a few others, and so we look forward to a wonderful time. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tell someone about the chat, and those who missed the program, please share the information on the YouTube channel so that they can go look at the discussion we have this evening. Lord bless you. Have a wonderful evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Samuel. Good night. How are you?
Well done, Sherry. Dr. Neff, well done. David.
Thanks, Aisha.
Good. Aisha.